You know, when I first heard about this raw milk thing going on in California, I gotta admit I was kind of surprised. Like, it's 2024, right? Lab-grown meat and robot baristas.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about unpasteurized milk. Turns out there's way more to this story than I thought, especially with this bird flu outbreak.
It's wild how something as basic as milk gets people so fired up, right? And this bird flu thing you mentioned, it's a total curveball, hitting dairies all over California, including this big raw milk producer,
Yeah.
Raw Farm.
Raw Farm. What's the deal?
Oh, they're like a big name in the raw milk world, you know?
Yeah.
Super into the whole traditional farming thing and convinced that unpasteurized milk is like nutritionally superior. But now they've got this quarantine and even a product recall, all because of this bird flu. It's hitting almost half of California's dairies.
Half. Wow. I knew bird flu was messing with the poultry farms, but I had no idea it was affecting dairy cows too. How does that even work?
It's actually kind of weird. Bird flu, or avian influenza, can actually spread to mammals, cows included. And it's through contact with infected birds or like environments that are contaminated. Now, it's not usually fatal for cows, thank goodness, but it can mess with their breathing and, you guessed it, their milk production.
So it's not that the milk itself has bird flu, but more that the cows are under the weather and that affects the milk.
Bingo. And because Raw Farm doesn't pasteurize their milk, there's that worry that whatever's in the cows could end up in milk we drink. Hence the quarantine. No moving the cattle, no selling the raw milk. They're basically on lockdown.
But didn't I see somewhere that they can still sell cheese?
Yeah, that's where it gets a little tricky. So aging cheese actually kills off a lot of the bad bacteria. So it's considered safer than fresh raw milk straight from the cow.
Huh, interesting. So we've got this bird flu outbreak, a raw milk producer in quarantine, and then you've got all these people who are really into raw milk, like they swear by it, even with all the health warnings. We actually talked to one of these raw milk fans for this deep dive. Her name is Raquel Cordaway. She's a mom of 4 from Antioch. She told us she knows the risks, but she still thinks the benefits of raw milk outweigh them.
Yeah, a lot of people feel that way about raw milk. Like Raquel, they're convinced it's got all these health benefits, better digestion, stronger immune system, even better skin, they say.
Raquel actually calls raw milk her liquid protein. She says she feels fantastic when she drinks it, and her whole family loves it. She even knows where to get raw milk straight from a farm if it's not at the store.
Wow, she's dedicated. But from a public health perspective, there are some serious concerns about drinking raw milk. And both state and federal health agencies are backing those concerns.
I know there's been a ton of back and forth about how safe raw milk is. So what exactly are the risks?
Well, raw milk can have all sorts of nasty stuff in it. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, you name it. And those can cause some pretty serious illnesses, especially for kids, pregnant women, anyone with a weaker immune system. We're talking things like E. coli, salmonella, listeria. You could get food poisoning, bad stomach problems, even life-threatening complications.
Okay, that's definitely scary. So how do those risks compare to all the supposed benefits of raw milk? Is there any science to back up what Raquel's saying about it being so nutritious, that liquid protein thing Raquel said? Does raw milk actually have more protein than the pasteurized stuff? Or is that just like a myth?
That's a good question. It's kind of the whole debate in a nutshell, right? If you look at the macronutrients, so like protein, carbs, fat, raw milk and pasteurized milk are actually pretty much the same. Pasteurization, the heating process doesn't really change those much.
Okay, so then where did this idea come from that raw milk is like better for you?
Well, some people say that raw milk has these good enzymes and bacteria that get killed off when you pasteurize it, and they think those are important for digestion and your overall health.
I've heard that too. Is there any research to prove that?
The research is kind of all over the place, honestly. Some smaller studies have shown that kids who drink raw milk might have fewer allergies and asthma. But it's not a sure thing, and we need way more research.
So there's no real scientific proof that raw milk is actually healthier.
Right. And don't forget, even if raw milk does have some good bacteria, it can also have those dangerous ones that can make you really sick. Pasteurization gets rid of those bad guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. But what about what Raquel said about feeling amazing when she drinks raw milk?
Yeah,
It's hard to argue with how someone feels, right?
it's true. Personal experience is a powerful thing. And it's awesome that Raquel feels good when she drinks raw milk. But I think we got to be careful about saying it's just the milk that's making her feel that way. It could be other things too, like what else she's eating or her lifestyle in general.
Maybe it's like a placebo effect.
Hmm.
Like if she believes raw milk is healthier, she might just feel better because of that belief.
That's definitely possible. The mind-body connection is pretty wild.
So if the science isn't clear about raw milk's benefits and there are real risks, why do people still choose to drink it? Is it just because of how it tastes?
For some people, maybe. They might like the taste of raw milk better or think it's creamier.
I've heard people say it tastes cleaner.
Interesting. But for a lot of people, it's more than just the taste. It's like a philosophy thing. They see raw milk as like this symbol of a simpler, more natural way of life. They don't trust big food companies and they want to eat things that are as close to nature as possible.
So there's this distrust of like big dairy,
Mm.
and people want to support local farmers.
Exactly. It's about feeling connected to where your food comes from and believing that smaller farms treat their animals better and are better for the environment.
It's a really complicated issue then, with all these different factors like
Yeah.
taste preferences, health beliefs, philosophies, even the economy.
Exactly. And this bird flu outbreak just makes everything even more complicated. With Raw Farm and other places quarantined, it's harder for people to get raw milk even if they want it.
And even if they're okay with the risks.
Exactly. Which brings us back to Raquel. She's decided to keep drinking raw milk, even with the recall and everything.
Seems like she's made up her mind. Even with all the info out there, she's going with what she thinks is best for her family.
And that's her choice, of course. We all have the right to decide what we eat and drink. But as we've seen in this deep dive, those choices aren't always so simple.
There's a lot to think about. Even for something as basic as milk. It's kind of crazy how this whole raw milk thing makes you think about all these bigger questions, like risk and choice and how we figure out what's best for ourselves and our families. I mean, we're making these kinds of decisions all the time about food, right?
Oh, totally. Think about it every time you're at the grocery store. Organic or regular produce, grass-fed beef, or the other kind, even what kind of oil you use for cooking. Every single choice has potential pluses and minuses. It can be a lot to try and weigh it all out.
And then you've got all the information out there and the misinformation too. How do you even sort through all the different claims and studies? It seems like everyone has an opinion and everyone thinks they're right.
It's tough for sure. It really shows how important it is to think for yourself, not just believing everything you hear or read, but taking a minute to think about where that information is coming from, looking at different sides of the story, even talking to experts sometimes.
So when it comes to raw milk, what's the bottom line? What would you tell someone who's trying to decide if they should drink it or not?
I think the most important thing is to know the facts, understand what the risks are and what the potential benefits are, then make a choice that fits with what you believe and how much risk you're comfortable with. If you're thinking about drinking raw milk, it's a good idea to chat with your doctor, especially if you have any health issues or if you're pregnant or breastfeeding.
It sounds like there's not one right answer. It's a personal decision.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about figuring out what works for you and your family. Maybe that's raw milk, maybe it's the pasteurized kind, maybe it's something else entirely, like a plant-based milk. What matters is that you're making an informed choice and you feel good about it.
So looking back at our deep dive into the raw milk world, what have we learned? We've seen that there are serious health concerns, strong beliefs, and a lot of gray areas. We've seen how something like a bird flu outbreak can have consequences we don't expect. And we've looked at the science, or sometimes the lack of science, behind the idea that raw milk is better for you.
And maybe the biggest takeaway, even something as simple as a glass of milk can lead to some really interesting conversations about risk choice and how we deal with all the new information about food and health that's always coming out.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up. To everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you something to think about. Maybe the next time you grab a glass of milk, you'll stop and think about everything that went into it. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those taste buds happy.